Hi everybody. So I want to make this video about a specific post that I saw where there was a flurry of different information, different opinions, different triggers going off. It was World War III kind of thread. So the original post was, if all you see around you, if all the people around you that you see are narcissists, perhaps the problem is not them. Which is a bold statement. There is an element of truth to it, but it is also not exactly all-encompassing. So I think a big part of the issue with the statement was that it was a very incomplete statement, and there was a lot of different factors that encompasses. So you can't just say, well, if all you see around you are narcissists, well, then you're the problem. That, of course, is a very terse, incomplete statement. I do understand what the post was getting at, and so I want to elaborate. So, one thing you have to understand and realize, especially after going through narcissistic abuse, it is extremely common and extremely normal to exhibit characteristics of an abuser, an emotional abuser, or a narcissistic abuser. It is very, very common and normal to exhibit traits of your abuser for up to a year or longer while you're healing. And this is because when you're in the abuse cycle, you go through a process of voluntary changes with each iteration of the cycle. You change yourself a little bit, you change yourself a little bit, you change yourself a little bit. It's like the whole analogy of boiling a frog, where if you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, it jumps right out immediately. But if you put it in a pot of comfortable water and slowly raise the temperature, you can boil it to death and it'll never try to escape because it's cold-blooded and it just slowly adapts. Now, so you've been cut like a key to a narcissist, is the example I give. Keys are a very good example that I love to use, because what's a good key, what's a bad key? What's a right key? What's a wrong key? Well, you can have a door key that opens a door, and that's a pretty good key. You can't say, hey, here's a good key, go crank your car, right? Because technically it's a good key, it's a working key, it's demonstrated that it's worked, but it's the wrong scenario, the wrong environment for this key. Make sense? So you've been cut like a key to a narcissist. And just because you're now different doesn't mean that you can't change back. You can actually change back to the way you were pretty easily. It's just a conscious effort, a conscious decision, and a conscious process, and you can actually get yourself back to normal fairly quick. But if you haven't, and if you're still in the healing process and you have not made these changes, you still wear the target on your back. A huge part of emotional abuse depends heavily on selecting the right victim as step number one. So you cannot emotionally abuse somebody that is not prone to accepting emotional abuse. This makes sense? So you got into this abusive relationship first because you had the target on your back that you were the correct victim to be selected. If you do not change those traits about yourself, even after you heal from the abuse and move on and move forward, if you don't take that target off of your back, you will still have abusers swarming you constantly. You have to get the target off your back, and that's a little bit outside the scope of this video, but there's tons of videos on my channel that do talk about this. So, keep this in mind. When you've been in abuse, you've got to do two things. Number one, you've got to get back to where you were before the abuse began. And then once you're there, you have to also recognize your traits and your characteristics that make you a target for abusers. Because believe me, I was the same way. I've been through several abusive relationships in my time. I grew up in an emotionally abusive household and physically abusive. my father would punish my mother by spanking us. He would find the smallest reasons to spank us whenever my mom wasn't doing what he said to do. And even whenever she did, he would do it just because, it made him feel powerful, I guess. So that was our childhood growing up. That was our model for life. And right out of high school, I spent several years in a long-distance internet relationship. This was in like 2000, 2001, with a chick in Canada who was a catfish. And I got catfish for a few years. And, so that was a pretty unhealthy relationship. Followed by a relationship with someone who was borderline personality. And she became abusive. And I had to break up by moving. I waited till I supposedly went to work. She went to work, and then while she was at work, I went and I got a U-Haul trailer. I got all my shit out of the house. I got everything out of my storage unit, and then on my way out of town, I stopped by the Sprint store and changed my phone number. And the last text I sent before I changed my phone number was, "I'm leaving. Goodbye. I left town." And then I changed the phone number and disconnected my old phone number. And then there was my last marriage, that was to a narcissist. That went exactly how you would expect. We were married 5 years, had a child, went through a horrible, horrible divorce, and we are now almost 5 years post-divorce and very happily remarried. So, all of this to say, the abuse I endured as a child put a giant target on my back. I got catfished, and then I got abused, and then I got abused again. And by that time, I started to recognize there's a pattern. And I knew nothing about narcissism at the time, but I came to realize that I'm attracted to crazy bitches. That's my type. I like the crazy ones. Because whenever I first meet them, I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, girl, you so crazy. I like that. You sexy and crazy." Followed by several months later, "Stop breaking my shit, you crazy bitch." Right? So that was my big epiphany moment. Maybe I just like crazy women. Or there's something about me that tends to bring crazy women into my life. Because every crazy I ever dated was one that semi-aggressively made herself available. So she made the moves, not me, because I didn't have any skills with girls. That was a horrible date. I never could really get a second date on purpose. So for someone who could never get a second date, all of a sudden this girl comes into my life and poof, everything's magic and perfect, and I fell for it, right? So I recognized that there was a problem with me. So to wrap all of this up, if all you see around you are narcissists, the statement that says maybe the problem is not them, it's you, that's not necessarily an accurate statement. A more accurate statement would be the problem is also with you. Because for as long as you have that target hanging on your back, there will be narcissists circling. And as long as you know how to recognize narcissism, you will see them. Until you recognize the target on your back, they're going to always be circling. Take the target off your back, and you will no longer see all the narcissists around you. They will show themselves out the door. I've learned how to do this. I have fixed that about myself. And these days, I can recognize when somebody abusive is coming into my life. And I do these several things that make them go away. And I'll tell you what they are. Number one, these are easy ways to remove toxic people from your life. Step one, tell them no. It sounds so easy, but it works. People always try to get in and manipulate, and they have these suggestions. They want you to do this, they want you to do that, and you say, "No, sorry, I can't." You tell people no a few times, and then they'll show themselves out the door. if they're trying to manipulate and get something from you. If they're not trying to get anything from you and you say no, then they'll say, cool, well, when can we? Well, let's make up another time, right? So telling people no is huge. Second thing you can do is have a non-negotiable weekly activity you do for yourself. Maybe it's bowling, maybe it's going to the shooting range, maybe it's martial arts, or going to the gym, or kickboxing, or a cooking course, who knows? But whatever it is, have a weekly thing you do for yourself, by yourself, without anybody else. This is a 100% you space. And you put that there because you want to see if somebody is trying to validate their importance by getting you to drop this thing you do for yourself. Or if they're trying to get you to put them ahead of your obligation. Makes sense? If you have this one thing that you do for yourself, this is the one thing I do for myself every week, and I don't sway on it because this is how I treat myself. The first thing that's going to happen if somebody's manipulative or looking to get supply or validation, they're going to try and get themselves prioritized over that. So, and then lastly, and most of all, you've got to work on you. You've got to be happy with yourself. If you can't be happy sitting in a chair with a puppy and a goldfish, with nobody else in the house, with solitude, you're not ready to be in the social scene. Because if you're not happy with yourself, if you need others in your life, and this is hard because I'm an extrovert and I go crazy, I can't handle solitude for a very long time. My brain is a very noisy place. It gets really, really loud when it's quiet. But you've got to love yourself. You've got to love yourself enough to be able to cut people out of your life, even if you love them. You've got to be able to let people go. Let them go. If they want to walk out of your life, let them go. If somebody's being an asshole to you, by all means, let them be an asshole. If they want to carry that flag into battle, they can carry that flag to all the way to God knows where. Carry it to the bank, whatever. You know? If somebody wants to be an asshole, let them be an asshole. If somebody wants to be terrible, let them be terrible. If somebody tries to blackmail you, tell them, go ahead. If you're going to be terrible, be terrible. Because the thing is, when somebody blackmails you and wants to hold something over you, for as long as they have that, they're going to try. So just say, well, go ahead. You know, I recently sponsored somebody that said this guy, he was a narcissist, and he was threatening, he had some naked pictures of her, and he said that he was going to send those pictures like to her father. And I said, well, don't worry about it, he won't. I said, even if he does, don't worry about it. He's your dad. You know, if anybody sends naked pictures of me, I feel more sorry for anybody who comes across it, right? I look like a hefty sack full of oatmeal, beaten with a bag of nickels. Ain't nobody wanting to see me naked. So, you know, don't, in these days of camera phones and the internet and all of that, the good news is you're one of billions and billions of pictures out there. There's probably pictures of just about every human walking the face of the planet. Don't sweat it. They want to be terrible? Be terrible. Don't lose any sleep over it, because everybody realizes at some point that if they do something, then they're going to look like the asshole. And if that's the flag they want to carry, let them carry it, because it doesn't reflect negatively on you. It reflects negatively on them when they carry out their threat. I'll say that again. When they threaten you, carrying out the threat makes them look like the asshole, not you. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this helps. We'll see you on another video.